My understanding is you're like pretty hardcore on the life side.
I
right? You're
prepped him, Michael.
Like down the line. She prepped me a little bit. Like you're like down the line, like as out there as you can get on it, right?
Yeah, I think we ought to protect babies. I think it's bad to kill babies. It's basically I guess that's an extreme position now.
I mean, that is a real thing that both Cuomo, it was something that Ralph Northam advocated for.
I guess why don't we leave this to doctors? Like who am I to like?
Because we're citizens of a self-governing republic and we have laws against murder. You know, it's so amazing that the Democrats who have been campaigning for socialized medicine for decades now say on this one healthcare issue, we just need to get the government out of it. What are you talking about? We're citizens. We live in a self-governing republic. We have something to say about the laws. That's why we're all talking about an election here. And we're talking about a matter of life and death.
I think it becomes very difficult to talk about when there's an entire movement that thinks that having an IUD is killing a baby. So at that point,
so you keep trying to change the subject from the real political issue to a contrived political issue because you know that the real political issue, as it's being fought, the Democrat position is completely indefensible and abhorrent to anyone who has even a modicum of a conscience. So
Mamma mia! But so why not? So why not argue around there? Like why not argue around the final trimester? And supporting if a fetus is viable, like then.
Well, hold on. There's a big difference between the final trimester and an IUD or something, right? There's a lot of space in the middle. And right now, the issue is that abortion is effectively legal at any point, including in some places after birth, which is just called murder. So I think what the Democrats are trying to do is really blur this issue. And I'm all for having, bioethical debates over the origin of life and all the right. I find that all very interesting. But we're in an election season. And what I'm observing is the actual political issue, the actual political, the policies that are being advanced by the Democrats right now, all concern those latter stages, the much clearer point of this, up until the moment of birth, shout your abortion, changing the penal code, for goodness sakes, in New York. Why is it that the Democrats, why is it that you, Ryan, when we're debating this right now, you are desperately trying to avoid that part of it? Because you know that that's a losing issue for people.
Well, I'll tell you the reason. My view on this is I don't even want to have a view on this. Like, exactly. I don't want to have anything to do with it. Like, I want this
slavery doesn't
to be
concern
left
me.
between women
That's an issue for the southern
doctor.
states. Forget about that. I don't
where,
know, bro,
where on your
you're
list
a citizen
is this?
in a self-governing republic, and this is a deeply important moral issue.
There's a lot of deeply important moral issues. Why do you care so much about this? I'm just curious. I don't even necessarily want to debate the question because I'm not sure there's even that much point. But what?
I'm happy to tell you why. Because the right to life is not just one right among many. It's not like the privilege to drive a car or the right to smoke a cigarette at the age of 21. The right to life is the fundamental right on which all of the other rights rely. It cuts down to the very core of our being. So this is why we have very serious laws against murder. It's why we take murder laws and murder trials more seriously than laws about jaywalking or tickets about parking. So this is obviously a really important issue. Cuts to the heart of who we are, how we think about all of morality and all of the law and all of the human person. And the people who we're talking about here are the most vulnerable people among us who don't have a voice, who are innocent little babies. So to me, that seems kind of important. I know there are a lot of big issues in the world, but I think I would put jaywalking or even tax rates at a less significant part of this debate than say the right to life.
Mamma mia, pizzeria, Michael knows is smarter than you.
Hi, Michael. Just a quick question to clarify. Are you aware of the fake elector scheme purported by Donald Trump during the 2020 election to fake a slate of electors?
I'm not familiar with any fake elector scheme, so perhaps you could enlighten me. Please, pass the microphone, please.
She said it could, yeah. So just to clarify, typically states certify electors and send to D.C. to kind of certify the vote. Yep. What Donald Trump tried to do, along with John Eastman, his lawyer, is fake slates of electors. Great for stealing election, maybe. Fake a slate of electors for each of the swing states. Try to submit them during January 6th and try to get Pence to certify the vote in his favor.
So you're saying there was a controversy over who had really won the electors in a state, and there were two sides who were disagreeing over that. And so they were trying to work out during the certification process on January 6th, the worst day in the history of this reigning republic, what to do about it. So my question to you is there any historical precedent for that? For what you call the fake elector scheme?
Sure. So there's one case in which I believe in Hawaii, where like it was in between Nixon and Kennedy, but not only was that case set as not precedent, it was also like due to an actual recount that the electors were certified.
You're missing another case. You're missing the actual historical precedent, which was the compromise of 1877, when during the 1876 presidential election, basically the exact same thing happened. And so, because there was a controversy over who had won, and we still have a separation of powers between the executive, the judicial, and the legislative, as well as, at least in those days, a separation of powers between the states and the federal government, then a compromise was worked out to deal with what happens from time to time, a contested election. Now, we've had contested elections in more recent memory, like the 2000 election, when Democrats denied that George W. Bush had legitimately won the election. So they threw that one into the courts, and that went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and then they still didn't accept the results after George W. Bush won it. So it seems to me what ought to have happened on January 6th, the worst day in this or any republic, according to some people, is that maybe we should have followed the historical precedent when almost that exact same thing had happened from 1877. And actually, that was precisely what was proposed by Senator Ted Cruz, as well as some supporters in the House of Representatives. And that was all going just swimmingly until the Democrats basically rammed it through and the Republicans lost their steam. If you are really of the opinion that when one party in the country shuts down the country, locks people in their homes, changes the voting rules, in some cases unconstitutionally, like in the case of Pennsylvania, which had prohibited widespread mail-in ballots in its constitution.
Mamma mia!
And then, after all of that, changes the election and then slows down the counting of the votes by not only hours, but days and weeks. And there are questions in people's minds over the integrity of the election. After Democrats had denied the results of multiple elections just within living memory, if you deny that half the country has the right to maybe work out that controversy, then I suppose you think we ought to just give the Democrats all of the elections. But if you believe, as I do, that it's legitimate to object to elections that are conducted unfairly and illegally in some cases, then you have to work out some kind of compromise, and what would have happened is, well, exactly what the Republicans tried to do.
So a recent Harvard study indicated that 45,000 annual deaths due to lack of health coverage in the US. And given that the US ranks last among the high-income countries in terms of health outcomes and equity, despite spending the most on healthcare, which is 18% of the GDP, how can you justify the multi-payer system, especially when countries like UK and Canada with universal healthcare not only achieve higher patient satisfaction, but lower per capita expenditure, but also maintain robust levels of medical innovation?
It's difficult to measure Canadian healthcare customer satisfaction because the Canadian healthcare system now murders its clients through the MAID, the medical assistance in dying. It's just a way for them to cut costs because there are a lot of healthcare costs that come up at the end of life. And so Canada decided the easiest way to deal with that is to murder their citizens. This is true in a number of other countries around the world. Unfortunately, assisted suicide has spread throughout Europe and other parts as well. America doesn't have that yet as a national policy. Unfortunately, some liberal states are moving toward that. That would be just one, I think, fairly evocative example of how statistics can be a little bit misleading and the quality of care is very important. America's system of health care also is different than the countries that have socialized medicine, and this poses certain challenges. For instance, I have 2.5 children, 2 walking around and then 1, is still cooking. And when I've had my children, well, I haven't had the children, but when my wife has had the children and I look at the bill, I see the bill is for something like $50 bazillion. But then it's not actually for $50 bazillion because medical insurance covers this part and the hospital actually was jacking up the price on this part, and it's all just kind of fake. And that's a problem that's gone back about 100 years to Franklin Roosevelt, a Democrat, by the way, who, because of his wage controls during the Second World War, decided, inadvertently, decided to upend the American healthcare system because employers then started offering medical insurance as a benefit for people to come work over there. We've never been able to get out of that since. So that's one problem. But then I think that the simplest way to dispel the myth that, Cuba or Canada have better health care than the U.S. is just to look which way the people are going. People from Canada, people when they can and when they can afford it, from everywhere around the world, come to the United States to get health care. It really doesn't go the other way. If I wanted to kill myself, I guess I would go to Canada. If I wanted to wait on a 6-month or 18-month waiting list to have a basic medical procedure, I guess I would go to Canada or anywhere else in Europe. But I don't want those things, and so I'll stay here.